Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Jodi Liscio. See if I pronounce that right. She tells me in Italian that means smooth wine. So Jodi Smooth Wine, we are going to talk to her today about her jump from a career in information technology into a pet business. Because isn't that a perfectly logical leap for someone to make? So Jodi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Well, let's start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I believe you were in corporate America for a number of years. So what did you do?
So I was in corporate America for about 27 years. The first day that I walked into the company that I started with, there was a big office up off of the main part of this beautiful, huge building. And I said, "What does that gentleman up there do in that, up in that suite up there?" And they said, "He's the CIO for technology." And I said, "Oh, great. I want to have that job someday." And everybody there laughed and we chuckled and went on with our days. And the rest of my career, I truly worked towards getting a job that was the CIO of technology. And so years later, through, we launched the first online bank through Wingspan Bank and a company called Bank One with John McCoy. Did a whole bunch of other great fun new future forward things in tech between JP Morgan Chase and some work I did at PNC. And it was absolutely fantastic. And then that final little dream job, when I checked the box on that, was everything I wanted and yet nothing I wanted in the end of it, right? So you put these dreams out there for yourself and you accomplish really big goals and you do things that I always say most would tell you could never achieve, right? And so I've always been about doing the things that people say either a girl shouldn't do or that defy the odds. And when I got to that C-suite, it was not rewarding like I thought it was going to be. And so as much as it was really great financially, my health really declined, and the commitment that it takes to work at that level, not that I was unaware of it, but it was just something that took away so much quality of my life because it was all about the work and the job that it just wasn't nearly as fulfilling as I had hoped it would be. And as many women as I feel like I've been told that I've inspired and they've worked through ranks wanting the same dream, right? And accomplishing that dream. It was really defeating in December of 2022 when I looked at the numbers in technology for women and underrepresented groups, of which I've been advocating and raised millions of dollars for through fundraising, that the numbers were as bad, if not worse, than the day I started. And so I was like, you know what? It's time to go back to my roots, small business ownership, and really make my company and my company's culture the difference maker, right? I can do something in my community. I can do something small scale. I might not be able to change the entire world of IT with its representation, but I can make sure in my business that I can hire those people that need representation and that need a place where they have purpose and belonging. And that is what really would bring me the most joy. And so when I looked around at industries, this is one in pet services that is dominated by women decision makers. 90% of the decision makers in the pet area those decisions are made by the women of the household. And so I was like, what better? And I'm so passionate about dogs. Like, what better way to spend the next 20 to 30 years of my life than being in that level of business? And I don't know if you've been licked on the nose by a dog lately, but kind of brings a smile to your face.
Well, Jodi, there's like four things I want to put a pin in that conversation here. And I want to start with, so you worked for 27 years. You worked your way up to this corner suite that you had been admiring for that long, almost a quarter decade or more.
Yeah.
How did you know when it was not right?
Um,
Or when did you know?
when did I know? Well, one of the things that happened was I went to an executive leadership retreat in Dallas, and it was a super spreader COVID event years after COVID, right? We're talking 2022, not during the height of it, and I had avoided it for that entire time, never had it. And it literally, I was getting blood work back, and it said fatal, fatal. I've never seen blood work come back on an app that said fatal before. Most people probably don't, and that was eye opening, right? And when you're not sure about what your future is truly going to be, and if you're ever going to leave that hospital, it puts a lot of um, clear decisions in your path of like, what would I have done differently, or what should I be doing differently, and how do I want to live my life going forward if I do get to leave this place? And that was when I said, I don't want to wake up every morning dreaded and tired and exhausted. I want to wake up vibrant and excited for the day and loving every bit of my day, night, and everything. So it was at that point where I said, everything I'm going to do for the next year, because it was turning into 2023, was going to be 365 days of nothing but a pursuit of joy and happiness. And that's what led me here.
Interesting. So it sounds like for you, it was the shock of a health scare that sort of
Yeah.
stopped the inertia of your current life, slowed you down for a minute to say, what am I doing? Is this the life that I want for myself? And your answer was absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Like,
So
I didn't want
what
my
did,
work defining me. I wanted other things to define my legacy, right? And that was the moment where I realized I had to change what I was doing if that's truly the life I wanted to live.
so what did you do? Did you walk in the next day and give your resignation? Like, walk us through the
I
process. You have
did.
this epiphany. Walk us through the component pieces of what you did with your job and how you started this search or path towards small business ownership.
There was some restructuring going on, and I was traveling every other week to Dallas and to Detroit. And during that time period, I just kind of made it known that, it was probably time for me to do something different. And with that restructuring, we kind of could all work together to find a good outcome that benefited everyone. And so that's kind of where the direction went fairly quickly, actually. And so within a number of weeks, I had kind of helped them build a new structure and moved things to where it needed to go. And was really ready to start life in 2.0. And so the it was honestly magical. I felt like it was a serendipitous moment that it all just worked out the way that it should be. And yeah, so I kind of felt like that was the path, or that is the path, without question.
That was smart. So you put this out in the world, you created some runway for yourself. So now you've made some space, you've moved away from this job, you've got presumably a period of time. Did you
hmm
immediately know that you wanted to be a business owner? Like, what things were you considering in your mind that you were going to do after this role?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. What I immediately thought I was going to do was, there is this favorite little ice cream shop that I grew up with that has started franchising over the last probably 10 years. Very small, very small. And I thought I was going to go to them, and I wanted to put my daughter is going to school for college in the South, and I love the South, and I was like, I'm going to build this little ice cream shop near where she is, and that'll give me an excuse to visit a lot. And then, and by the way, like who doesn't love ice cream? And it's just this feel good moment from my past that I could bring somewhere else to kind of give that fun experience to families and kids and that kind of thing of, after a baseball game or a sporting event where the team wins and some parent says, I'm buying ice cream for everyone, right? I wanted to like have those kinds of moments with me because that was so fun for my childhood. And then it ended up that it just the location and it didn't work out. And I had too much money in the stock market that I couldn't get liquid for them short enough. And so, not to say that that won't be out of the scale or happening someday, but it just wasn't the right time and the right things working out. So, that was my first thing in terms of business ownership. But I grew up in a family-owned business, so I knew I wanted to go back to my roots, and I wanted to kind of own my own business and create my own culture and do all of those things. So then it was a matter of, do I create it as my own or do I buy into a franchise? And what's the path of least resistance? And just so I spent about 6 months just really making sure I explored a lot of different opportunities before I settled in on what I was going to do.
So with the family owned business, what was that business and what was your sort of interaction with that business growing up?
Yeah, so my great 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 grandfather immigrated from Ireland, and he worked several jobs at one time to create a company called Kennedy Oil. And we did transportation logistics for petroleum, kerosene, et cetera, to large mining companies, farms, like really remote farms where they can't take that heavy equipment and actually get it filled. So we would take trucks to them and fill it up. So things like sideway, highway, things that highway teams that, are paving and those kinds of things that equipment doesn't leave to go to the gas station, obviously. So,
Yep.
they would take and fill with large businesses like that. And so I grew up in that. We had a couple little gas stations. And funny little story. And I think I was nearly in college before I put gas in my car for real, because it was like always like, oh, you just fill up at work. So like, or somebody would take the car around back and fill it up for you, that kind of thing. So people, when I went to college, they were like, what do you mean you don't put gas in your car? You know what I mean? So
Sticker shock.
exactly. I was like, you're just learning different things. So, but yeah, so that's what my family did, and it's been passed down for generations, 3, 4 generations, and then all of us kids my age, the grandkids, we all went our own direction. So when my dad and my uncle retired, they sold the business off to another company. So. But it was great to know that we were part of a community, a pillar in the community, extremely community minded in terms of sponsoring baseball teams and making sure we treated employees like they were family, and doing the right thing when it needed to be done, right? So
Yeah. So you had an experience with a multi-generational business. So you had seen how that had impacted and lifted up your family. And so when
yeah.
you decided to step away from the corporate world because you wanted more control and more impact, there was already a sort of model of how to get that. Tell us about the 6 months. So you're going
It's
down
really
this path
fun.
with the ice cream shop, the deal falls apart, and then you decide I'm going to go date as many businesses as possible. So what did that look
Essentially,
like?
yes.
What
I
things
mean,
did you look at and what did you learn in that process?
and honestly, it was the most fun time because I was like, I love traveling, and I was like, oh my gosh, I get to travel and it's a tax write-off. This is fantastic, right? So, it was great. I mean, you're looking at different business models and comparing different kinds of doggy daycares, and you'd walk in and I'd go, not my like, not this level. Or you're again in a franchise model, you're looking at Are these the salespeople that I want to work with? Are these the people that I want to get in this 10-year kind of marriage with? And are these people that I'm really going to jive with, that we're going to be on the same page about how to grow something that's immature into something very mature? Do our core values align? It's not even just about what you do in the bottom numbers in terms of the EBITDA that it's returning, but it's also about all of the things that the company does and the people behind the company that has grown it, that is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
Ethics and integrity when you grow up in a small town in a family-owned business is of the pinnacle of importance. And so, I would never get involved with something that I didn't feel like reflected those same kind of values and those things that I hold most dear, because I wouldn't want to have to compromise myself or my ethics on behalf of a dollar. So that's what I was walking away from. I certainly wasn't jumping right into the same situation.
Yeah. So it sounds like there were really two things you were looking at. One was, do I do a startup of my own or some type of franchise model? And then what's the sort of industry that I want to be in? So I'm curious, how did you explore the startup versus franchise thing, and what made you decide on the path that you went down? And then we'll come back and talk about the industry piece.
Yeah. So part of the decision making was I really started looking at franchising first, mostly because the model is already there, and then it's kind of like an open up the box, set it up, and then turn the key on, and it works, right? The problem with that, though, is that there were so many, the pet industry boom after COVID caused a lot of growth in the industry, billions of billions on return in that industry invested year over year. And therefore, a lot of people entered it and grew a very successful business. That being said, a lot of those businesses were not being run in a way that I thought matched the way that I wanted to run my business. Either maybe the health standards we weren't aligned on, or maybe it was the franchising fee setup structure with the way that they were investing in the branding of the business and growing the name of the business wasn't aligned with the structure of the revenue payments. Or the third thing that was misaligned was looking at, the leadership team, and that do they really have while they grew a business to this big, do they have the business to grow it to the next level? And if you're emerging, there's a lot of meticulous growth strategies that have to be in place. And do they have the people to really get them there? Or are they sticking with their small little business owners that have been with them all along? And then are they just going to always be what they've always been, right? And so getting to unveil those plans without stealing the secret sauce is a tango of a dance to play in that way. And so it was very interesting. And ultimately, I chose to start my own business because through all of those discovery day kind of processes that you go through with franchising, I picked and chose the things that I liked best about each one of them, and then matched that with what I thought my ultimate dream was, right? And what my market was missing when I was the consumer, I wanted to add. So my dogs have stayed in a lot of different places, and I ultimately stopped sending them anywhere in my market because I didn't feel like they were up to the standard of care that I needed to not feel guilty for leaving them there. And we really have worked to resolve that problem.
So that's interesting. So the franchise exploration process actually showed that for you, a startup was a better option because then you could put it together in the way that felt more consistent with how you wanted to operate. I'm curious, had you already locked into the doggy daycare after the ice cream shop, or were there some other things that you were looking at and considering before you settled on that?
So I looked at things from a pet store in terms of there's a really great holistic pet store that was emerging, dog grooming. I stayed within the pet industry because I really felt like that was a great sweet spot for me to be in. but I did not go very far after the ice cream shop. I did look at a company called the Milkshake Factory that is actually quite interesting and fun, and then a little donut shop too. And both of those, again, I was like, if I'm really on a health journey as well, this is probably not the best option for me. I will probably consume too much of the product. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and really when I looked at sustainable growth, a dog lasts for, 7, 10, 12, 15 years. And building that long-term relationship was really where I wanted to be with clients as opposed to a short-term consumable interest that kind of churned and burned from a client perspective and was less likely to build that sense of community and truly an ecosystem that we could be part of. So,
Got it. And so you had already felt a need personally for better care for dogs when you were traveling, and you were traveling a lot,
right.
presumably when you were in the corporate world. So
hmm
tell me where you started with in terms of what you thought was missing in your market and how that evolved as you got deeper into some of these franchise models into what eventually became the business that you launched.
Yeah. So the first thing was boarding conditions, right? So when I would take my dog and they would have to spend the night somewhere that wasn't at home in my bed, um, I felt terrible. And then the check-in process was like, hey, do you want extra belly rubs for them? And then $5 for 5 minutes, and I would have gladly paid $5 for 5 minutes. But the experience then left me as a client, right, saying, you should be rubbing my dog's belly anyways, right? You should be giving them the love and care that I want for them. Just put that in your pricing model and don't tell me and ask me if I want them to have it. Just do it for them, right?
Oh,
And so what I found is it's a bunch of low cost models that are $35 or $40 a night that anybody can afford. And then they guilt trip you into another $40 worth of services that you do add-ons for. Do you need an extra potty break? Because all they get is 3 times out during the day. I'm like, 3 times, right? Oh, they're going to be left alone from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. in a building. I was like, that's way too long for my little 5-pound dog to go without going potty, right? And then I was like, and then what bad behaviors are they going to learn from that? That they can potty in the house or that they can do, right? And so I was like, this doesn't work for me.
so I guess my question is, it sounds like what your experience was that every provider out there was at the value focused side. And it was
Yes.
much more like you went out there and you were trying to buy an airline ticket and they were all Spirit Airlines.
Yes.
And you thought to
Oh, that's a
yourself,
great analogy.
there are
Yes.
people who don't want to feel like they're being nickeled and dimed, and there are people who want to just spend a little bit more and know that they are going to get a different level of service. So
I
tell
feel
me
no
tell me what
different than
you
my dog with my dogs than I did with my child. And that is, I wanted the best education for her. I wanted the best environment for her. I wanted her to understand privilege, but also understand that you have to earn things in life, right? And so basically, I looked at it like I want a place to put my dogs where they learn all of those things, but they still feel nurtured and loved and cared for, and you know their health is not going to be in a compromised situation. Yeah.
Did you have that much clarity when you were out there looking at these different franchise models, or do you feel like you got clearer as you were looking at those models and realizing like, hey, there's not a solution out here that really fits this upper part of the demographic that I would want to experience?
Yeah, so I had the clarity based upon my travel schedule for work
Yeah.
that I didn't have a solution in my market that fit my need, but my need couldn't have been. I'm not the most unique situation that a lot of people felt about their dogs that way, right? Um, the the clarity that I got while going through the franchising process was that this is pretty much the model that's out there. There was one franchise that I really felt like could potentially align, but the cost to open it was exorbitant. I mean, millions and millions of dollars right up front.
Oh, wow.
And so the price for entry was just beyond my capability at that point.
Is that because there was such a large build out involved with it? Like what was driving the
Yes,
cost?
it was a huge build out. of
Okay.
very expensive materials, very expensive, beautiful chandeliers that were, $2,000 a piece. Was like, wow, I don't know that the dog cares about a $2,000 chandelier, but I
Yeah.
realize as a customer, I do, and that I want them staying where I feel like it is the pinnacle of, of everything that there is, in terms of, again, you walked in the place and it smelled amazing. It smelled like roses, right? It's like walking into an Italian restaurant and smelling roses over garlic. When does that happen, right? That's what I wanted for my business, is that people would walk in, but in my place, we smell like lavender because it's calming, over anything else, because I don't want it to smell like wet dog, right?
Yeah. So you,
It should not smell that way. So there's lots of little things we picked up on, but it definitely was not something that I knew that I needed or wanted as part of my business model.
yeah, what I'm hearing is that you found a model that felt aligned on the high end side and some of the personal touches that you were looking for, but there was a little bit of disconnect between how they thought about what was worth spending money on.
Yes. And I didn't want to charge people for the belly rubs. I wanted to hire people who wanted to do the belly rubs and would do the belly rubs no matter what, and pay them a great salary, well above market, so that we could, again, we charge a premium price. We are probably the most expensive place in the market, but they will have an experience that is unduplicated. We have clients that say, "You've created Disneyland for dogs." I'm like, what better compliment can you have than that?
So you walk away from this last franchise, you're not feeling like any of them quite hit the mark. What did you do at that point? Like, how did you start to figure out, okay, I'm going to do this on my own? What are the pieces I have to put in place to make it happen?
Yeah, so I basically looked at that model. I was already looking for real estate, and we found this great independent building in a great area that I knew they were going to start demolishing this movie theater and building up $600,000 condos. And the apartment communities were really high end around there. So it was like a great model in terms of small spaces that were expensive for people. And then we started working on, are all of the right personas in this area that we think is truly the people that we need to make this business work. And it really, that piece of property, to be able to lease it, all came together, which is very difficult for dog space to find.
Is it?
And yeah, so it's not an easy thing. There's so many ordinance to go through, and that's again why I looked at franchising, because they've got that part all worked out in the models, whereas I had to go that alone and figure that out for myself in my city and in the county and all of that good stuff. But yeah, so I went through and we basically carved out, the space. We redesigned it. We re-engineered the flooring and put in drains into the floors so that, again, we have proper sanitation conditions. That was $80,000 worth of work just to put some drains across some floors that already
Yeah.
exist. I mean, it adds up really quickly. But the place is now beautiful. And it's gorgeous colors, and, it's this beautiful jewelry based blue, if I hint at that, and it's calming and soothing, and the dogs aren't barking nonstop, and they get to truly work. And we designed a curriculum that nobody has, and basically went off some research at Ohio State that they had done about enrichment and extending dogs' life through enrichment. And we used a lot of that research, and put that curriculum together to truly give you more valuable years with your dog, for our day program. And then it's an all inclusive resort for our stay program. So if you need to leave your dog gets everything it needs: a bed, a little cottage with an iPad in it to watch TV and to do all of the things. We have attendants there overnight, so nobody's being left alone. They get potty breaks every 2 to 3 hours. And so we basically cracked the model of everything I hated about what I felt was not going to work for me and my dogs, and put it out there in a business model. And I'm really
Jodi,
hoping it changes the future.
so walk us through a little bit about how you built this plan. So you decide you want to do this on your own, was it like you went and found the space and then you started to develop the plan, or were you already developing the plan and building a financial model and figuring out how much all this was going to cost? Like,
So
give us the high level.
I was building my own plan simultaneously with exploring options. So I
Okay.
was like, if I do this on my own, here's what it's going to mean for me. If I do this through somebody else, here's what it's going to mean for me. And comparing and contrasting when you have your own plan and then you're just basically updating it, right? And you're tweaking it based upon every visit that you make. It clearly like laid out the direction I was going to go. And then post that, I started saying, what can I do immediately without a facility? And so we started training. And so dog training can be mobile and in a client's home very quickly. So I hired some trainers and we started down the training path first, knowing that if we can get some well-trained dogs out there, that what comes naturally after that is maintaining
Yeah.
it. So our program maintains obedience as part of the curriculum. So
Well, not only that, you're creating the customers you want to have.
exactly.
That's
And so
brilliant.
that was our pipeline. That was our initial pipeline that we then could start a customer base, start building the brand. We got a couple vans and we wrapped them and put them out in the community and started building that way. And then within the year, we had our facility opened and, really started working towards the goal of taking those well-trained dogs and making them into our small group pods and then allowing them to help share and tell our story through social media and connecting with a great SEO partner to then grow the knowledge of enrichment academies over doggy daycare, right? And so
Yeah.
branding it with a different name was a catch-22. People didn't know what we meant by that. And so when you Google it, you don't find us as well. But at the same time, we definitely did not want to be known as doggy daycare. We
Yeah.
felt we were special and different and elevated. And so we wanted a private school kind of feeling.
You're the Montessori of the dog care
I
business.
have been told that as well.
So I want to talk about the vans because that is an interesting wrinkle. So you invest in vans, so you're committed now to what do you use them for today? Do you take these dogs on field trips, or do you still have the training business that's sort of
We
a
still have the training
marketing?
business.
So it's
Yep.
a marketing part of your business where you're driving exposure out in the community that then brings people into your space.
Absolutely. Right. So I wanted QR codes on the van. I wanted them to be able to scan it. I wanted that name all around town to people to say, well, what is that? Right. Oh, it looks cute. And that would start the inquiry process. I also knew that both businesses would feed each other. So when you can go find great talent and you pay them more than they're making anywhere else, and you treat them well and you give them a culture and you let them know that their own opinions matter and that they're valued and you listen to them, and that they actually can influence the outcome of the business based upon their knowledge. It's a triple crown win when it comes to a hard economy with employees. And so that was the primary thing that I started with, and we've continued to do that. So we pay probably 4 or 5 $6 more than anybody else in our market does for our employees. And it makes a huge difference. The loyalty that we have,
Yeah.
the way that we make work fun. And I treat my employees like they are the absolute most important thing because then I know they will treat our customers the same way. So we are out there. We want to be the Chick-fil-A of the fast food business, if you want to say that, where everything is our pleasure. We customize for you. You name what you need. We make it happen for you. And that's what our clients really need. We go after the busy executives who need to outsource their life in a lot of different ways. And we want to make it easier. So, we have concierge level service to every client. We use those vans to pick up and drop off dogs because people are too busy to do that.
You got a
We
bus service.
will
I love it.
Exactly. So we use them during the day for appointments, and then we use them at night for drop off and pickup. They're so versatile. And, we bought the crash test rated crates to travel and put them in, which is the car seat best for the dogs. And we, again, did everything in a very high end way, but through the dog's eyes for safety, and where we know that it makes the right sense for experience, right? We
Yeah.
have epoxied floors. We do not have beautiful tile. We don't have beautiful marble in our lobby. But the epoxy looks great too. It's
Yeah.
got a little sparkle in it, right? So that's where we spent more money on the experience in our people than we did on fixtures and other things because we know
Yeah.
that's where the value is.
Well, let's talk about the dollars piece because I'm interested in this. How much did you
hmm
project this was going to cost when you were first starting, and how much did it actually end up costing you when you got done with all the build out?
So our projection was that we would spend close to 450,000 to do the build out over the almost 2 million, right?
Yeah.
Which we were really happy with. We finished within 15% of that. So I
Oh,
wasn't too unhappy with where we went, given the economy has changed drastically
yeah.
in this time period and cost of things really has changed as well. So we found a really great local contractor that did our business, and he just had a really great eye for and appreciated where I met him. And I had my hobby prior to this was just building homes and doing architecture and design work. We had built like 7 homes before that, so it was just kind of a fun thing to do as a hobby. And now it's one of those things that I got to go back to those level of roots, but it's amazing what you can do with just a little bit of design flair,
Oh,
with
creativity.
inexpensive product. Yeah, just how
Yeah.
you lay it, or basically how you intertwine the elements and that kind of thing. So that was my favorite part of the process, was doing that. But yeah, we weren't very far off. So I was really happy to settle in. We did most of it upfront with cash and took out very little in terms of lending options for us to get into this business. So
Awesome. So you walked away from the $2 million franchise and you value engineered your way into a $500,000 launch of this training business and doggy Montessori private
yeah,
school overnight Marriott. Um, how did you end up funding it? You said a little bit about cash, a little bit of borrowing. So help us understand how
yeah.
you figured out the way you were going to approach funding the deal.
So I knew that I had been saving for my retirement since well, my undergraduate degree is in finance, so probably since I was in college, right? And so I've been a diligent saver. I always made sure that my 401k was invested in at the max before I'd pay myself. That was what I was funding. I never wanted to work until I was, 70 something, which is probably the likelihood of where it'll end up being by the time I can retire. And so with that, I decided that for me, doing a ROBS program or the rollover business startup program where you can convert your 401k into a different level of investment and invest in your own business without the tax write-off was well worth the 4, 5,000, $6,000 that it was to start up a business, because that was where most of my money was invested. And so, while I highly valued the savings and the growth that came out of that, I was like, if there's a time to risk it, it's now. And so I that's how I ended up funding most of my business. We ended up taking out a couple of little loans for the vans and things like that
Yeah.
where it just made sense. But yeah, for the most part, and then we did a little small business line of credit.
Did you consider other options or had you sort of locked into the using retirement funds pretty early in the process?
Well, through the ice cream shop, that was really where what struck the deal down, was that was my intention, or that was kind of where I knew my intention was. Um, and I had enough liquid, um, but they would not allow you to count anything that was invested in the market. And so I was like, well, gosh, that's crazy. So then I went and started looking through some home design brands. Again, I love houses
Yeah.
and design and that kind of thing too. So I was like, well, and then when I started talking with one company pretty seriously about this emerging brand, and they had 3 or 4 emerging brands, I was like, oh, this whole Rob's thing makes a lot of sense. And then I went back to the ice cream shop and they didn't even know about it. So I was like, well, which makes sense. They were just a little small family owned company, right?
Yeah.
But, so, but no, it was really important part of me being able to do this because I wasn't touching and paying penalty on money that I invested that I didn't want to do. And it didn't then tie up truly my personal finances into business finances. So basically it just converted into stock in the business. And now my 401k is essentially stock in my own business.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
so with the vans and the small line of credit, walk us through the logic there. Did you buy brand new vans? Did you buy used ones? Why did you decide to finance them? Like, because this is a common
Yeah.
thing for businesses that need to buy, vehicles.
So we decided to buy vehicles that were used.
Okay. Smart.
And we found some really good low miles, but older models, but we bought very low tech vans. They happened to be Ford Transit Connects, and we needed air in the back. So we couldn't have truly commercial vehicles
Seats. Yeah.
looking, but these fit the need. And so the seats folded perfectly for us. They turn into great cars to use when we have team events and that kind of thing, where you can pop the seats back up.
Yeah.
And we knew that they had a lifespan usually to 250,000 miles. So,
Oh, wow.
we thought that that was a good investment when we could find them. And I went to Indianapolis to get them. And I went, to many other locations to make sure that we got good quality ones. And then it just so happened that we could also get them under warranty. So we could buy a little
Oh,
bit of a
wow.
warranty that they're now extending on used cars when you buy them even secondhand for 3 or 4 years. And so I thought that gets me over the hurdle of major maintenance on the car. So that was the safety policy. And then my business would be up and running and could afford major maintenance once it had expired. But that was kind of a risk that I was glad to find, that it reduced that in terms of, all we really had to worry about were brakes and tires.
Talk to us a little bit about the line of credit. What made you decide to do that? How did you shop it around? What were you thinking within the business model? Hey, I need this for this reason, or I just want to have this on the side. Walk us through your logic.
Yeah, so I think that having liquidity available to you that you're not paying on unless it gets used was important, but I wasn't doing it at an interest rate that a credit card was going to give me, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, knowing that there might be a few months where we've got to draw into that to make payroll or to afford rent and payroll at the same time, those kinds of things I knew were going to be part of our operating model when you start, and that we needed probably a good 4 months before we were going to be net neutral. And so, or at least in the profitability side. And that to me was the great solution, that if we had a really good month, I could pay more back. But then if we didn't, and that wasn't the right decision to make, that I wasn't going to be, paying more than like some of the interest on the loan. So I felt the line of credit was a better option. And again, we were pretty cash heavy, given the fact that I had rolled over, a large part of my 401k plan. So, that I wasn't worried about, but that was also going to be, the investment. I didn't know how much of that we were really going to draw on as we were doing the commercial build out.
Yeah.
So, managing the commercial build out was really important so that the cost didn't get away from us. Otherwise I probably would have had to do a loan on top of that. So.
And so did you have a particular number in mind that you were looking for with this credit line, or did you just try and get as much as you could from one of the banks you
Yeah,
talked with? How'd that work?
we just did as much as we could.
As much as you
So
could. Okay.
we were able to secure $100,000 in a line of credit. And that gives us, again, the flexibility to draw on and pay back. And just, again, we need to order inventory. Great. It gives us a 30-day lead time. Then we can pull in the inventory, get a lot of it sold, pay it back, and then just keep the profit. So it just gives us so much flexibility in accessing it and being able to use it in a number of directions that, again, we wouldn't necessarily have, that would draw down too much on what I was comfortable with from a reserve perspective.
Yep. Sounds like you built a financial model, and that financial model said you were going to need 4 months to get to profitability. So what actually happened? Tell us what was
So,
better than expected and what was worse than expected.
yeah, so where we are with that is, the things that didn't pan out well. We started with a first company that did our SEO marketing, and I sunk a lot of money into that, and it didn't produce results. Not one sale, not one sale.
Wow.
And so I was like, oh God, like I went to the leadership team there and I said, listen, I have invested thousands of dollars with you, and the leads are not matching my persona at all. Like, and I went back through all the data with them, and I was like, you got to either let me out of this contract or you're going to do it 6 more months for free. One of the two is going to happen, because you're going to crush my business, right? Like, I can't do this. You can't compete in business today without great command of understanding the Google platforms, the analytics, and all of that. So they ended up letting me leave from the contract early, because they realized they weren't
They
I
didn't know how
mean,
to do it. Yeah.
yeah, they were like, we don't know what else to do, and they're a really successful company. I don't know why it just wasn't a match for what we were doing. But then I went smaller, and I found somebody that was more entrenched in my community, but also in understanding the dog business. And they did a lot of great work for some nonprofits. And so they took those organizations from hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual income to millions in annual income in about 6 months. And I was
Wow.
like, well, there's the proof in the pudding, right? So let's go in that direction. So that made a huge difference. And so, yeah, we're really just encroaching on that point, in terms of, making sure that the revenue and the outlay, that we're having, and understanding and mastering the cycles of months, right? So we realize August is a terrible time to be in this business.
So you're learning the seasonality
Yeah, the
of it.
seasonality of it, right?
Yep.
So, people love you at spring break. People love you at the holidays. The summers are great months because people are going on vacation, and so boarding is high. You hit August, and it's like, mm, like a stop, like a hard wall stop, because every mom is getting their kid ready to go back to school.
Yep.
And so they're too busy with their career and that and whatever. And so the dog is the last thing on their mind in that month. So it's like, so now we're working through those kinds of challenges to say, what do we do to make things more interesting or make things different, to ride out that seasonality and to work through it. So, that was probably one of the biggest hurdles, was not knowing the seasonality of the business. Whereas if I went a franchise model, they would have already had that figured out.
Yeah. And as you've looked at the various lines of business of what you do, what have you learned about? I mean, clearly you had a set of projections, like this much is going to come from training, and this much is going to
Yeah.
come from overnights, and this much is going to come from, day trips. Like, what have you learned in practice once you got on the ground about where you were wrong and right on that front?
So, we based upon, I would say our business model is that more revenue comes in through our training than I expected, but
No.
it would make sense because that was the business we started with. So we had
Yeah.
already grown the name. We had already, you know what I mean? So
Yep.
that worked really well. And it continues to be, about 50% of our revenue right now. I think we still have a ton of room to grow in terms of still getting people in our community to understand how our academy is different than a doggy daycare. And as the more we break through that, again, through, working with other companies at the chamber, and, working through women entrepreneur groups that are here locally, the second you tell your story, people are like, oh, yes, like you're now my only option.
Yeah.
But that happens slowly and more organically. And so you've got to be ready for that. And then we started a third line called Positive Vitality, which is basically nutritious treats and bones and really great hormone-free, antibiotic-free things to feed your dog that is great for digestive health and overall for them, because I needed to fill up my retail space with stuff. And why not go source that on my own and bring better quality goods to my clients at a lower price and get the supply chain and the big business out of what we were doing, because everything for me was about, again, returning to that underrepresented groups and making sure that there was a visibility and a voice where people didn't have it before. So that's basically what we were able to do. And I love the fact that we continue to go to businesses and give them free space where they don't have a storefront, that we are all in the same industry, to give them that visibility. So our clients are walking by their products all the time. We're changing up our feature table. Our clients love it because they're like, oh, what is this new? I would have never known this existed, right? And again, it's just that really good stuff about ecosystem building, where you're giving as much as you are taking in terms of your share of the market, and you're sharing that blessing with other people.
Right. Jodi, what have you learned when you think about the best value of your time to grow and support the business? What did you walk in thinking that was going to be? And what have you learned about what's really true about the most important thing you need to be spending your time on?
Yeah. So ironically, even though my degree is in finance, that's the last thing I want to be doing, is sitting and looking at spreadsheets. As much as I love data, I don't want to prepare it all. I just want to hear the storylines, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the C-suite in me still coming out, is like, all of the things that get it up to that point where you can bubble up the data. I miss people doing. I greatly miss people doing that level of work. And and there's a decision making of, is it better to pay somebody to do that for you because they're great at it, or is that an expense your business can't afford? And I spent a lot of the last year figuring out who to pay and who not to pay, and we've done that with social media and pulling it back and then putting it in my trainer's hands and then pushing it back out to another supplier. And all of those things are, again, really cyclical in terms of what we've done. But I make time every day. I drive the shuttle bus and do drop off and pickup, because talking to my clients and them knowing and seeing my face and knowing that I want to be the face of this business, and that I'm not going to let any of that get ahead of me, then them feeling completely appreciated in their trust in me is so important. And then beyond that, I spend a lot of my time networking. So I'm out nights usually. I hate to say, stalking dog groups, meetups, and showing up at breweries, hoping people are there with dogs, and doing things like that. While my team takes incredibly good care of our facility. So I spend very little time in the building, as much as I love being there, because I really need to be out making sure, again, just continuing to grow the understanding of what we do and how we do it in the marketplace.
Yeah, I'm hearing you're the chief storyteller, and the most important problem you got to solve is helping people understand what is different about your model than any other model out there. And so you're doing
Exactly.
that when you're driving around and actually talking with people, and you're doing that when you're showing up at a networking event.
And that's really that was our hurdle. It's not that people don't want to invest the money in their dogs. It's not our price point. It's not, as soon as they come in and experience it, they're like, this is incredible. But
Yep.
until I can get them in the door, nobody understands what we do. And so it's bringing a whole new concept that has never been done before to market is not for the faint of heart or for a weak stomach, that's for sure.
I'm curious, as you think about your journey up to this point, if someone came to you tomorrow and said, "Hey, I think I want to start a business. I'd love to get your perspective." What is maybe the most important piece of advice or perspective that you would share with them?
One is, do not let fear stop you from doing what you believe is pursuit of joy, make sure that you truly have a love for the business. Because if you do not love, eat, breathe, sleep it every day, every night, it is a grind at times. But if you do not love it and you are not passionate about it, you're not going to want to see it through, because it is hard before it's easy, right? And everybody sees entrepreneurship as this wonderful thing, but if you go track my personal social medias, you'll see the gruel of it, right? You'll see me at 4 o'clock in the morning before an event called Bark Bash, still putting labels on my product, because I'm like, ugh, our labels came in late and we had to get a last minute run done locally over the place that was supposed to ship them, that we knew they weren't going to get here in time. And thank God for this business that saved me. But I mean, and there's days where you don't sleep for a day or two at a time. And that isn't easy, right? And I would also say find great people to be in your circle. So we started what I call the Sassy Lassie Club, and it's women who are in my corner who are great in business, in different aspects of business. And we all sit down once a month. Sometimes it's virtually, sometimes it's together. And we all make sure that we are fueling each other's fire, so that there is nothing that we can't do together. Collaboration is absolutely key. And if you think you know it all, you are just scratching the surface at what you really need to know. And somebody's been there and done it before you. So learn from that wisdom and make sure that you have that support when you need it. Because there's been days where a friend of mine up in Ann Arbor is doing something very similar. And she's like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I'm like, you're going to do this. You're going to wake up tomorrow and we're going to put the steps together and you're going to do this, right? And so you need people like that to constantly cheer you on and to say, the success is inevitable for you. You just need to stay the course. And enough people doing that for you will keep you focused.
Love that. I'll also point out, Jodi, you were a C-level executive, so that's its own level of hard. So what's different about the hard now from the hard that you've been used to in the corporate world?
So I would say the difference level of hard is the fact that, in the corporate world, believe it or not, there is always more money. So like, you get a budget, it runs over, you're like, yeah, no, there's more money, right? My resources are finite. Like I know what it is and I know what that bottom line is, right? And
Yep.
when that bank account starts dwindling down and you've got really high six figures and then you're mid six figures and then you're like, all right, the build out's done and that six figures is now low six figures and then you're under that down to five figures, you're like, I don't want to be poor, right? And so the fuel that comes out into this big spurt of like, all right, I got to go make magic happen, and it's all on your shoulders. In a corporate environment, you're having a lot on your shoulders. It's not all on your shoulder, right?
Yeah.
You're not the only one there. In this environment, I really take seriously the fact that people's food on their table is on my conscience, right? The people who quit their jobs to come work for me, not only are they passionate about what they do and they're amazing people, but I got to make sure that I keep the roof over their head. That's a whole nother level of pressure that I probably didn't think about as much as it then came face forward to me.
Yeah.
But it's a great motivation too, because you want to make sure you're making people proud every day with the decisions that you're making and that you're not stopping until you're proud with the product that you have, or the service that you're providing. And if it doesn't meet your standard, like you're the one who can make all the change happen. Like at the end of the day, everything is your choice. And that
Yeah.
level of empowerment is so freeing.
Yeah, I'm sensing from you, Jodi, that you are having a lot more fun and living a more fulfilled life. And that
Absolutely.
what you mean when you say it's harder is that the stakes feel bigger
They do.
because now there's not someone else to point the finger at. There's not someone else coming to rescue you with some more budget money. And what makes it hard is you're feeling and growing under the weight of that.
Yeah, in corporate America, you're swimming in an ocean. And entrepreneurship and small business in one little town in central Ohio, which is where we are, it's a pond, right? I mean, we're not talking like across the pond like London. We're talking it's a pond. And so you feel it all. It's like the pressure cooker is there and it's just really intense, at times. But then it's also 10 times more rewarding when you see people and they come up and hug you and say, nobody's cared about me the way that you care about me, right? When somebody needs a doctor's appointment and they have no insurance and I go anyways, I'll take care of the bill. Go do that, right? Like that's caring. That's treating people like they're your family. That is nothing's more important to me than you are. And the reaction that I get that they don't even understand why I would do something like that, it's been more rewarding than anything.
Yeah.
Because, like that's truly what I wanted to come back to.
That's beautiful, Jodi. Thank you
So,
for
thanks.
sharing that here as we wrap up. How can people find you? What's the name of the business? If they wanted to look you up and send you a DM, like what would you want to say to anyone in our audience, in just terms about what you're
So
doing?
we are called Unlimited Possibilities, Canine Enrichment Academy. And we are like in Hilliard, Ohio. So if you're Googling us, that's where we are right now. Location 1. There will be more coming, I promise. And our website is unlimitedpossibilitiesinc.com. But we also have a redirect that's smaller, but it's been up and down lately with my platform, but it's MyUPEC, so MYUPEC, Unlimited Possibility Enrichment Center.com, that you can find us. We have our online store available there that you can order positive vitality stuff. We ship anywhere in the United States. And we also put out a ton of great content through our social media platforms for positive vitality and for unlimited possibilities, where you can understand our curriculums and you can understand what we do, that you can almost create this in your home, but most people just don't have the time to. So would really appreciate the support. And we're going to be on TV on a show called The Blocks. So it's a what I would say is The Apprentice of Days Gone By meets Shark Tank kind of thing, and we are coming on for season 17. So our business was featured there, and our story is being told in terms of just what we're doing from a business pioneer point, and it's really been fantastic. So,
well, that's fun. When you get that recorded and you have a link for it, let us know and we'll drop it in the show notes for everybody to take a peek
I would
at as
love
well.
to do that because they've filmed so much good footage, but I think it'll be early in 2025 that drops, and it may even be on a really big subscription service.
Great.
When it happens. So
Name no names. I got it. Well, Jodi, thank you for joining us. It was really special to hear a couple of unique things about your story. One, your sort of franchise to startup journey and how that took shape. And then to hear from someone who's sort of in the middle of that first couple years of getting something off the ground. A lot of times we talk to entrepreneurs who are sort of past that phase and they're, a little bit nostalgic about it. You're living it right now. And I will just say, you're doing the work, because this is the hardest time of being an entrepreneur. So you're doing some great stuff, and just want to give you all the encouragement we can to keep going and making the change that you wanted to see in the world.
Thank you so much. This has been just such a joy speaking with you today, and I really appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, Jodi. Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.